my contention is, when I was making it, it was like, you're making this film, and the idea was that we're all responsible for this, that his sacrifice was for all mankind, and that for all our ills and all the things in our fallen nature, it was a redemption.
In 2004, Mel Gibson released a film that didn't just tell a story, it shook people. The Passion of the Christ showed the final hours of Jesus with a level of realism most audiences weren't prepared for. Raw, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. But for Gibson, that film was never the full story.
It was a great movie, but
Yeah.
it seemed like there was resistance to that movie,
Oh yeah, no, there was
which I thought was very strange. There was like Hollywood resistance to that movie. Like people didn't like that you were making it. It seemed like.
Yeah, there was a lot of opposition to it.
For more than 2 decades, he has been working on the continuation, a story that doesn't just stay on Earth, but moves across realms. A story that includes angels, cosmic battles, and a descent into hell. And the version of Jesus Gibson is trying to bring to screen doesn't fully exist in the traditional Western Bible. It aligns far more closely with something preserved far away in Ethiopia.
Especially with something like the Passion that I did, the written word was very important, because it was, you got all those books, the Bible, you've got the different Gospels and stuff that people are quite familiar with. Half the time, they didn't even need to read the subtitles. They could look at it and know what was going on.
The hidden text that changes everything. There is a book once widely known in early religious circles that most people today have never read. The Book of Enoch. Written centuries before Jesus, it describes a figure known as the Son of Man. Not the gentle, soft-spoken image many people are familiar with. This figure is powerful, overwhelming, almost terrifying in authority. He stands in a heavenly courtroom surrounded by fire. Angels fall before him. Entire nations are judged in his presence. When you compare this to the Book of Revelation, the similarities are almost exact. White hair, eyes like fire, a voice like thunder, a presence so intense it overwhelms everything around it. Scholars like George W. E. Nicholsburg have pointed out these aren't random parallels. Later texts may have drawn directly from older traditions like Enoch. The Epistle of Jude actually quotes Enoch almost word for word. Early Christian thinkers referenced it freely. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't controversial. It was part of the conversation. Until suddenly, it wasn't. In 363 AD, during the Council of Laodicea, the book was rejected, labeled dangerous, removed from mainstream use, and over time, it disappeared from most versions of the Bible entirely, except in one place: the monks who preserved the truth. While much of the world was standardizing scripture, something very different was happening in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church developed in isolation, cut off from the political and religious decisions shaping Europe. While other regions debated which texts to keep and which to destroy, Ethiopian monks simply kept copying everything. High in the mountains, in monasteries carved into cliffs, they preserved manuscripts generation after generation. Written in Ge'ez, an ancient sacred language, these texts were treated not as dangerous, but as truth. Among them were works like Enoch, Jubilees, and the Ascension of Isaiah. The Ethiopian Bible contains up to 88 books, far more than the 66 found in most Protestant Bibles. That's not a small difference. That's an entirely different version of history. And within those extra texts, the image of Jesus begins to change. The Christ most people never saw. In Western tradition, Jesus is often portrayed as calm, gentle, and approachable, a teacher, a healer, a comforting presence. In Ethiopian texts, that's only one side of him. Here Jesus is described as radiant beyond comprehension. His face shines like the sun. His voice shakes reality itself. His presence bends space and time. He is not just a guide, he is cosmic, a force commanding both angels and demons, whose authority extends beyond earth into the structure of existence itself. Once you see that version, it becomes hard to go back to the smaller one. A message that challenges everything. But the most controversial part isn't how Jesus looks. It's what he says. In these texts, one statement changes everything. You are not children of dust, but children of light. Traditional teachings often emphasize human weakness, sin, brokenness, dependence. But this flips that idea completely. If humans are children of light, the divine isn't distant. It isn't reached only through institutions or intermediaries. It's already within you. That idea is powerful and dangerous. Because if people believe they can connect directly with the divine without needing an institution, the entire structure of authority begins to shift. As Christianity became more organized under figures like Constantine, belief systems had to be unified, controlled, standardized. Texts encouraging direct personal connection with God were no longer just spiritual ideas, they were threats. And many were removed. The seven heavens and the hidden journey. One of the most fascinating texts preserved in Ethiopia is the Ascension of Isaiah, describing a journey through 7 distinct levels of heaven. Not vague ideas, but structured realms, each with its own beings and laws. As Isaiah ascends, the environments become more intense, more radiant, more overwhelming. Then something incredible happens. The text describes Christ descending through these same levels, but in reverse. At each stage, he limits himself, conceals his full power, adapts to each realm so he can pass through unnoticed. By the time he reaches Earth, he appears as nothing more than a child. That changes how you see everything that follows. The crucifixion, in this context, isn't just a human event. It's cosmic, a moment where the source of existence itself experiences death. And the resurrection, not just revival, the full return of limitless power, unveiled all at once. Why this version was forgotten. If these ideas were once known, why did they disappear? The answer almost always leads back to power. As religious institutions grew larger, they needed control over what was taught, how it was taught, and who had the authority to teach it. Teachings that emphasized inner divinity, personal revelation, or journeys beyond the physical world couldn't be simplified into rules or rituals. Anything that cannot be regulated becomes a risk. So the texts weren't always erased in one moment. They faded slowly, replaced by versions easier to manage, easier to teach, easier to protect. The Convergence, Gibson, and the Ethiopian Vision. Go back to Mel Gibson. The film he's building, filled with multiple realms, fallen angels, and a resurrection stretching far beyond Earth, sounds strikingly similar to what these Ethiopian texts have been describing for centuries. Whether Gibson studied these sources directly or reached similar conclusions through deep immersion in Scripture, the overlap is difficult to ignore. What he's describing isn't just a sequel. It's a shift in perspective, a version of Christ that doesn't exist only within history, but across time. When audiences see this on screen, it may feel unfamiliar at first. But that discomfort might not come from it being new. It might come from it being older than anything they've seen before. The living legacy. In Ethiopia today, this vision of Christ was never lost. It didn't need to be rediscovered, because it was never removed in the first place. Here, Christ is both gentle and overwhelming. Not just a teacher offering guidance, but a presence that reshapes the atmosphere around him. In Western tradition, comfort often comes first. In this tradition, awe comes first. And then within that awe comes peace. Even the miracles carry a different meaning, not interruptions of nature, but restorations, moments where creation responds to the one who formed it. For centuries, one version of the story dominated, but it was never the only one. Far away, in mountain monasteries, another was preserved, quietly, patiently, a version that sees Jesus not just as a man, but as something far greater. And now, as it begins to resurface, one question remains. If this much was forgotten, what else is still waiting to be found?